Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first volume of the Southeast Asia Election and Democracy series of discussions held by Association for Elections and Democracy. Before we start, I would like to give some brief explanation what is the Southeast Asia Election and Democracy series of discussion. So actually, this is a series discussion conducted by Perludem, try to cover various issues on electoral process and also about the democratization process in regional, in specific in Southeast Asia. The series of discussion also have an objective to provide a multi-stakeholder forum for civil society organizations, practitioners, the journalists, and also the academic environment to share their knowledge and democracy in election issue in Southeast Asia. And also, in addition, the Southeast Asia Election Democracy series of discussion hope can contribute to produce the solutions for election issue and democratization problems in the Southeast Asia. So for the first series of this discussion today, we will talk about the impact of COVID-19 to democracy process in Southeast Asia. As we know, COVID-19 outbreak plays significant challenges on our democracy process, not only in Indonesia, but also in around the globe, in particularly in Southeast Asia also. So regarding with that, we hope this discussion can identify and can also examine what is the challenges, what is the problem about the impact of the COVID-19 on the democracy process in our region. But in particular, we hope also this discussion can contribute, give some recommendation what we should do about to protect the democracy and also to strengthening the democracy. So for today's discussion, we have 4 speakers from 4 countries. The first speakers is we have Chandanie Watawala from ASEAN Network for Free and Fair Elections, or ANFREL. Hello, Chandanie, how are you?
Hello, how are you? And thank you for inviting. Yeah, good
Thank you,
afternoon.
Chandanie. Thank you, Chandanie. And for the second speaker, we have Thomas Fan from Bersih 2.0 from Malaysia. Halo Pak Thomas, apa kabar?
Hello.
How are you?
Hello, Eric. Good to see you. Hello,
Good to
everyone.
see you.
Thank you.
Okay, for the third speakers, we have Eric Alvia from National Citizen Movement for Free Election, or NAMFREL, from the Philippines. Hello, Eric. How are you?
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, thank you for inviting me and thank you for allowing me to share our insights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And for the last, we have Mbak Titi Anggraini from Association for Election and Democracy. Hello, Mbak Titi. How are you?
Hi, Heroic. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for your invitation.
Okay. So everyone, before we start, for the participant from Indonesia, we also provide the translations for all of you. Just choose the interpretations below on the toolbox below. So you can choose Japanese, and so you can hear the translation from English to Indonesia. So for everyone also, if you have any questions, please type your questions on the chat box, on the Q&A box. So if you have any further questions, so we will allow you to share your questions directly to the speaker, and we will open your access to microphone and also to the videos. So we will start from the first speakers. We have Chandanie from ASEAN Network for Free and Fair Election. Chandanie has a strong focus on what the COVID-19 impact on the elections in particular. But also nowadays, as we know, ANFREL also have a strong focus issues on the Myanmar issue that we know today. After the elections, Myanmar has some coup from the military, and ANFREL also has a strong focus on the ANFREL. So Chandanie, maybe you can explain to us what the significant impact that bring by COVID-19 to the role of democracy in region, and also what we need to do for the next election, for example, to prepare if there is some more problem like COVID-19. So the floor is yours. Your time is 15 minutes.
Thank you so much, Heroic, and also thank you so much for Perludem for organizing this, and also the inviting ANFREL to be share that our experience in Southeast Asia during the COVID and the democratic situation. Before I start for the the sharing, I would like to share my PowerPoint. Give me. Okay. I think yes. Okay. I will go to the left. Okay. Okay. You know that in global pandemic, actually that it was started in the early last year in Wuhan, China. By March, it was transmitted to our region or the Asian region, and by and large, it is affected most of the countries, especially like Indonesia is one of the most affected country, and also that like Philippines and the Myanmar, there are also somehow is badly affected. And Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia, Singapore, those are also somehow affected in by and large. And some like Laos, PDR, and Timor-Leste, there is like less affected countries we can recognize. However, it is like at that time, COVID or the new virus emerged, no one aware what is that the virus and also how to mitigate that virus, including that is affected to that right now also we don't know how to mitigate the risk, even when it's vaccinated available. It is the new virus affected for our lives in a different ways, the economy, our traveling freedom of life and everything. In the same time, it is affected for the democracy in the most of the Southeast Asian countries. Okay, actually that my presentation, I try to focus on the few areas that is like did COVID-19 have an impact for democracy in Southeast Asia? When you look at the last year, there are 6 South Asian countries, major or the local election supposed to held in the last year. And including this March, it is almost 1 year. There's no people may say, oh, it is already reduced the risk of the COVID, but it's not yet. And some countries, second wave, third wave is started. And therefore, with all that, the election also that in my presentation, I'm trying to find out that what are the countries they had the elections and also how is the impact of the last those elections. And also that the second point I'm trying to discuss about what are the major challenges for ensuring the democratic during the pandemic. And also even that is a challenge, are there any opportunities that we found out during the last year or during that the period? And also that I'm trying to come out in the lastly that some recommendation for the election stakeholders, because it's we know that election is like everybody. It's not only the election management body or the civil society. It's needed many stakeholders involved in that for ensuring the free, fair, and genuine election. Okay. Okay, then in that case, you know that we can go back to that different countries. What are the elections they held, and also what are the impact on those elections? Actually, that if you go back to the country specific, we know that Singapore is the country. In July 10, the last year election was held. Actually, that Prime Minister of Singapore, they decided to go ahead with the on time. He say like that in the statement, he mentioned that election is important to have during the, especially during the pandemic, to ensure the economic stability. And also that lastly he mentioned that there's no guarantee that this pandemic will end. And he decided to go ahead with the elections with the on time. And also that we have seen that the Singapore, of course, that they have resources, they have techniques compared to many of the countries, and also the very strict laws. It is not democratic laws. That is also that they try to organize the election with those different like environment. And we have experienced the last Singapore elections increase the voter turnout. It is like, according to my information, Singapore increased like a 2.11 compared to the previous elections that voter turnout. And also we have seen that some of the alternative the methods they are taking, like allowing the senior citizens to come and vote in the early, like they arrange like early hours for senior citizens, and also that expand the voting hours if they have anybody have a symptoms, anybody think like that is not in a normal circumstances, and they asked to go for in the late hours like 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. like that. In that way they try to give us some alternative methods to like encourage voters. And also that that is, I'm not going to talk about much about Singapore, because the Singapore democratic situation is much different from the other Southeast Asian countries. And of course that Indonesia Pilkada election supposed to held in September, but it moved to the December 9th. And I'm not going to talk about that elections. I'm sure that Miss Titi will cover that elections. And also the Malaysia, also there were by-elections, and also that the some elections, then Sabah and other places. I'm sure that Thomas will share that experience. And Philippines also, that Palawan plebiscite election was scheduled to in May last year, but it was moved to the March this year. And I'm sure that Eric will cover. My sharing experience will limited to that Thailand local elections and also the Myanmar general elections, November 9th last year. Okay, when you look at the Thailand, the local elections, it was actually that Taiwan local elections supposed to held like a long time ago, but it is like a postponed. Finally, the first local election was held in December 20 last year. We managed to, ANFREL managed to deploy, actually that deploy means it's like a the small team of the people is like 4 people in different like provinces to see how the elections operated, just to get the idea during the pandemic how they organize. One of the things that actually we realized that the Thailand local elections, that is, and also that the last local election was held, the recent one actually that was in last Sunday. I personally go and visit to get experience from some of my staff. And one of the things we have realized from the both elections, low voter turnout, less voter interest. And also that the second point, actually that low voter turnout means that it's indicating few things. If you look at the low voter turnout, first thing is that it actually Election Commission of Thailand from the last election in the December election, they expected over 70% voter turnout, but it is end up with the 57 or the nearly 58%. And maybe like there are reasons for the low voter turnout, maybe lack of communication, lack of voter education, and also that less interest from the democratic arena. And also that we have seen like there's no alternative method in Thailand. The voting is the compulsory, and also that in general election they have advanced voting that was recognized, that was like appreciated by the many election stakeholders, including ANFREL, allowing people, those who cannot vote in the election day, allowing them to vote in advance. especially this is good for the country, like many countries, we are proposing that system to the other countries also, advanced voting, early voting, because that because of this current the commercial system, current economic system, people are not staying in their own home places. They are moved to the different places like working purpose, education purpose. And if there's no that kind of procedure, people, especially the last local election, we didn't see that advanced voting. And nobody want to go back, like if that there's this kind of, they have to take leave, they have to spend money, and even though compulsory voting, the people cannot go back to their own places to vote. And this is also the one of the things we identified from the last. And also that we have seen that confusion on over the ballot papers. In the last election, especially in the last December elections, we have seen that many ballots were invalid because that showing up the lack of voter education. The country needs a lot of education for the people and how to vote. If that confusion, especially about the confusion of the ballot papers, new rules, regulations is needed. And also that I already mentioned about the alternative method is important for increasing the voter turnout, the voter participations. And also that the enforcement of the COVID-19, maybe that is not the reason, there may be reason. People are not sure about the risk mitigation methods. They are not going for the elections, voting, even it's whatever that they don't want to like compromise their health for any reasons. And of course that we have seen that every polling station, they have a thermometer to check that their temperature, and the polling staff wear the mask. However, it is like a social distance. If people are not aware, even the voters, they are not aware of those things, and also that it's not implemented. It is one of the reason for also that reducing the voter participation, and also the reducing the democratic election, the environment. And the one of the experience actually I would like to share from the last Sunday elections. When we like observed the polling station, we were asked from the polling staff, one of the questions we asked that if any voter comes and also the identified have a like higher temperature, about 37, or what are you going to do? They said, no, it's okay, they can vote. Okay. The same questions we asked from the evening, the tabulation center, or the like a senior polling staff, or the who are in the center, and they told us, oh, if there's somebody we found and there's a separate ballot, like a casting place to vote, and also the ballots, the separate place, and they can, but it is not implemented, not aware, not enough awareness about those things. And also that the less media interest from the last elections. We have seen media also have a major role to play for the awareness, and also that fair campaign, the environment, and also that the in civic educations. But even the Sunday election, I didn't see any media article about anything after the election. We are looking at the Monday papers, Monday news, but nothing about the election, on the less media interest in the overall in Thailand elections we have seen the local elections. That is the situation. Okay. I would like to go back to the next country. That is my major focus country, is like Myanmar. Okay, Myanmar elections, we are, of course, that the current situation is like a very the sad. Even the people, everybody, they spend a lot of cost for ensuring the elections on last November 8th. And ANFREL also that took part observing the elections, and also that we released that interim report. And that we have witnessed to the last elections. And anyway, that maybe I think we can maybe any chance in future we may discuss about that the current situation, especially because of that military regime that undermine the people choice. And of course, that when we look at that last elections, we have seen like a Myanmar general elections coordination, like it is like especially during that this kind of situation, COVID situation, it is new. It is very important to have a coordination with the relevant authorities. Election management body is that main authority, main organ for organizing the elections. However, it is important to collaborate with the different stakeholders, different groups, and also that we know that election cycle, election day is like only one activity of the election, overall election circle. Pre-post election, that means like a pre-election period, we know that pre-elections, mostly the electoral reform and the voter registration, political party registration, candidate registration, and also that campaign period, and many things, and also the preparing logistics, many things involved. And post-election period also that we know that it is like it is part of like the dispute resolution for many things, and also tabulation. In that is I think it's election is the biggest logistic operation in any country, especially the major election. Therefore, it is very much needed the cooperation among all the stakeholders, health authorities, security, everybody. If you think about the risk mitigation as well as the balancing that in the democratic elections. And we have seen that the Myanmar election, we have seen that they are cooperating with the health authorities to come out with some regulations, some the guidelines for the risk mitigations, and also the resources. And we know that we needed a lot of resources for the organizing the elections. But when you look at this kind of situations, that the risk mitigation, you need an extra amount of resources. And maybe like it's come out from the government, or you need to cooperate with the other technical supporters. Like the last Myanmar election, we have seen that they incorporated with the IPS, IDEA, international ideas to get support. Including the polling staff training and other things, and they need like a risk. Polling staff need to wear the lot of like the methods, and also that the PPE and hand sanitizer, many things that need to be done, and also that I have already mentioned about the media have a major role for the elections, and if that the media is not comply, and also the ready to not and misinformation, disinformation a lot in the last election in Myanmar. That is, and also the campaign mechanisms. Normal like a old method, or the normal method is the campaign is the political parties, their door-to-door campaign, or that the meeting with the people, or the town hall meetings. But in this kind of situation, we have to reduce the physical contacts. Then you have to come back with a new technology using that social media, or however it is, maybe I can talk about later. Even that is also that some party, they have a lot of money, some candidate, they have money. If there's no enough regulations, enough laws, and those who have resources, they spend a lot of this, and those who doesn't have, they may. That is why that I think the political party, they need to get together, and civil society engagement, that is also important. So election observers, civic educators, and those who are like that is also that important, even while risk mitigation. And one of the example is like I remember in the last election, even it's not Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka elections, ANFREL and civil society or the domestic observers get together, they prepare a code of conduct, not waiting for the regulation coming from the election commission. They themselves, they decided, oh, we are also part of that risk mitigation. And when we are doing our operation, we are following, these are the things we are, every observer, sign that the code of conduct for ensuring ourselves also part of supporting the electoral process in this difficult time. And role of media is, when we look at the role of media, it is not only the media like a mainstream media, it's like a government media, and also that the social media, whatever media, they also have a role to play in this, like the voter education, and also that informing that the messages, and also the risk mitigation, and also that if the requirement of the proper laws. I mentioned about that, especially those who have money, they spend like a lot of like online messages online, they have money, and those who doesn't have, and therefore that I have seen that last Myanmar elections or many of the Asian countries, there's no proper laws, regulation, the campaign finance or media ethics. I think one of the bigger issue we are advocating, like ANFREL advocating every election in most of the countries in Asia, no proper laws and regulations. Not only the COVID situation, any of that. And also the alternative strategies that we need to think about, like advanced voting. And the last, Myanmar election, we have seen that the election commission took a lot of like alternative strategies that allowing that they have advanced voting or the early voting. However, they expand that and to the senior citizens, like they went to above 16, they went to their homes to get their vote. Of course, and like that way, and also the increase in the polling stations, reducing the number of voters, that is also the part of the risk mitigation. Those kind of regulations, those kind of strategies that need, and we have seen from the last Myanmar elections. Okay, are there any opportunities? I think the challenges, there's opportunity, what I believe. And also the this COVID situation also that giving like a lot of opportunities to the democratic levels. And also that every election stakeholders, especially legislators, they think about the electoral reform to ensure the democratic and free and fair elections, and also the improve the campaign mechanisms, like go to the new the methods online, and also that the reducing the plastic, so whatever that also, and also that increase in the media participations. Media, media also themselves that come out with some own self-regulations to how we can incorporate, and also the sharing the news, and also the increased civic education, civic engagement. And those are the things I believe that there are opportunities. We have seen that some countries, some elections, they have took that the special arrangement, and that is also actually that reducing that the resources, and the same time the reducing the fraud, and reducing the increase in the free, fair, and also the democratic election environment. And finally, actually, I would like to go back to the recommendations. And I think my recommendation is go to the, I thought like election is like it is the many people involved for the elections. It is like we call election stakeholders, starting from the EMDs, political parties, candidates, legislators, media, civil society, INGOs. Not only that, voters also the part of the election stakeholders. For EMBs, they have a major role, and also the first if there's elections in during that kind of period, and they need any kind of period, they need to assess the situation. Are we able to go for elections? And of course, organizing the periodic elections is like a fundamental or the internationally accepted principles or the law. But however, not only the periodic election, ensuring the democratic election also that is a fundamental responsibility or the rights of the internationally accepted principles. And therefore, if any country go for the election, they need to assess, and are we able to, and also how we are risk mitigating, and also that what are the things we needed to ensure the while balancing, it's like a balancing both sides, risk mitigating and also the ensuring the democratic elections. And they need to consult with the different stakeholders, election groups, and also they need to analyze the resources, how much resources they have, how much resources they needed. And also that those things, I think it is important to have, and also that they need to think about what are the alternative methods we can ensure. And also that the second part is that second group for political parties and candidates, that is also the important. And the one of the example I can bring from Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka Election Commission, they try to introduce advanced voting or the pre-election, like voting, pre-voting for the reducing the risk the country, but the election law is not provided the advance voting. They need to get the approval or the agreement from the political parties. Political parties did not agree. They could not implement that one. And also that the legislators, they need to think about what are the needs, what are the reform they needed for the, maybe this is a good example. This is the experience for future elections. What are the campaign finance, media laws, and media laws means not like the undermine the media freedom of the media. It's like enhancing the media rights and also that supporting to the ensuring the free fair elections. And CSO, INGOs also they themselves have their responsibility towards the ensuring, especially the domestic observers. And they need to think about how we can comply with the laws, regulations to risk mitigations. And the same times, how we can continue our engagement for continue our work. And also the CSOs who are doing the civil education also the part of their responsibility. Make aware of that their own people, what are the things that the new, if there's any like if there's any that they introduce advanced voting alternative, they need to aware of their own like community about that these are the available alternative methods, you can use it. And also the voters also, they have to, first thing is comply with the introduce regulations to risk mitigation, and also not to lose their rights, because that is also that some may think, oh no, I don't want to go and vote. No, you have to go and vote, but while risk mitigating. I think these are the things that I want to highlight in my experience. And I finally, actually, for the concluding, I think that whatever the situation, that the elections or the democratic elections need to be ensured, whatever the environment. And we need to find out new strategies, the consultation, new ways to ensure in the democratic elections. I think I will stop with that, Heroic, and if there's any questions, comments from the after that, I'm happy to share more experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chandanie, for your very fruitful explanations. Like Chandanie mentioned a lot of the experience in our Southeast Asia country, especially in Thailand and also in Myanmar. So Chandanie also told us that the COVID-19 is very impactful to the way how we organize the elections in region, but also in the other countries. For instance, Chandanie also mentioned in Thailand, the impact of the pandemic COVID-19 is the decreasing the vote turnout and also the absence of the special voting arrangement like advance votings. And also Chandanie mentioned how the conditions in Myanmar when the last year they conduct the elections, and also there is some lack of regulation regarding the campaign mechanisms. And finally, Chandanie also recommended, even though there is some pandemic COVID-19, we need to ensure the electoral democracy must goes on by providing the risk management and also conducting like special voting arrangement, advance voting, postal vote, and so on. Thank you, Chandanie, for your explanation. Now I will move to the second speaker from Malaysia, Thomas Fan from Bersih. So Thomas, the question is also same with the Chandanie. So what do you think about the pandemic COVID-19 situation and the impact of our democracy, especially in Malaysia, and also the way how we engage with the people, especially for civil society, to advocate some democracy strengthening in our region. The times is yours, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Herrick, and a very good afternoon to all my friends here and also the viewers out there. I would just give a country report on Malaysia, what happened during this time of pandemic. And I can say that it has been momentous because as many of you know, about 2.5 years ago, almost coming to 3 years now, Malaysia had a historic general election where we saw a change in government, a peaceful change in government for the first time in our country's short history, when the Pakatan Harapan coalition managed to defeat the Barisan Nasional coalition that has been in power since our independence. And so that released a lot of expectation and hope that there will be more democratic reforms and changes. Indeed, in that 22 months that they were in power, we saw opening up of media space, and people felt they were able to participate more and engage more with the new government. In fact, for Bersih itself, we enter into a new era of engagement and proposing reforms that was promised by the new government. We were disappointed that the reforms were slow in coming, but there were some reforms taking place. One of the most significant reform was actually the lowering of voting age from 21 to 18, and because that took a constitutional amendment to our constitution, and we had overwhelming support from both sides of the political divide for that amendment to lower voting age to 18, and also bring in automatic voter registration. So everything was looking up, but yet in the background there was this communal or ethnic tension that was stirred up because the allegation, or rather the feeling, was that Malay political party lost power, even though the new government was a multiracial coalition and parties coming together. So that built up to what we would call a political coup at the end of February 2020. That's just over a year ago. So in that 1 week of political machination brought about by basically the Pakatan Harapan coalition, one coalition partner, the Bersatu Party, and a group of MPs from the Justice Party of Anwar Ibrahim. They broke away and joined up with the opposition that lost the general election. They joined up with UMNO and the Islamic Party to form a new government. So on the 1st of March last year, a new prime minister was sworn in to replace Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, and we suddenly have a new government. So we view that change of government midterm in this manner as very damaging to democracy in Malaysia. Because when people went to the general election, they made a conscious choice, majority, to have a change in government. But here we have a group of politicians, a small group of politicians of less than 40, deciding to defect and change and brought back the old government effect, essentially. So we call that over here the Sheraton move, because this whole scheming began in a hotel called Sheraton. So it's called the Sheraton move over here. And since that defection, from Bersatu and some of these Justice Party MPs, it triggered a series of collapse of state government. After the federal government collapsed, state government, where they also were in partnership, they also defected, and then six state governments saw a change in state government. And one of them was triggered a state snap election, the state of Sabah. Now that one was very important, and I'll come back to it later. But the timing of this political takeover was end February and early March, and that was at the start of the COVID pandemic. The realization that we are having a pandemic globally. So Malaysia has its lockdown on the 18th of March, a lockdown where there was what we call a movement control order in place. Businesses are closed, and people are not allowed to come out other than to buy essential items like food and medicine. And so we had that for about three months of that situation. Then it began to ease a little bit as COVID was under control. But what happened was we saw basically civil liberties being curbed and restricted very much. And what is of a greater concern is that even very early on, this new government under Muhyiddin Yassin, they call this new government Perikatan Nasional, or in short, PN. They are in power based on a very, very slim majority in parliament. A majority that was not proven by a vote in parliament, but only shown to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, our monarchy king. And he decided that Muhyiddin commands the majority of member of parliament, and so he was given the opportunity to form the government, but it was never tested in parliament with a vote. So, but there was always that suspicion that he has a very, very slim majority of maybe 2 or 3 MPs only over the opposition. And because of that uncertainty and vulnerability, he had the first parliamentary sitting. Parliamentary sitting was due in March itself, the month that he took over. But he postponed that. But under Malaysia Constitution, you can only you can't have more than 6 months after the last sitting, which was ended in December. So he had to hold a parliamentary sitting, and he held a parliamentary sitting just for 1 hour, so that he fulfilled that constitutional requirement. So the MP came together just to hear the king's speech, and then they dismissed, and then they are able to extend not meeting. So the parliament did not meet during COVID, but by October, because the country need to pass the yearly budget for next year, they had to call the member into session again. And with that, there was a lot of uncertainty whether this government would fall or not. And in the end, there was some negotiation, and budget was passed. But at the same time, the government tried for the first time to persuade the king to declare a national state of emergency, to suspend parliament and election. But to the surprise of many people, and maybe to the delight of some people, the king did not agree to that, did not assent to that declaration in October last year. And that also brought about a new concern: the role of the monarchy in our parliamentary democracy. We are seeing a rise prominence of the monarchy in our politics. And that is not something that I think we see as a positive sign in a democracy, but that is the outcome of that. And so then we also saw several by-election due to death of the member of parliament or the state assembly person that was due. But the government used its power to postpone this by-election due to COVID. But what they didn't postpone and couldn't at that time was the Sabah state election that was triggered because of defection again. Defection by members from the ruling state government to the opposition to form a new government. So before they could do that, the chief minister dissolved the state assembly and called for a new state election in Sabah. But the outcome of that state election was that we saw the second wave of COVID surge in our country that in many ways has not subsided. Because I think of the poor observance of SOP by politicians who are campaigning and voters who are coming out. The election commission did put into place SOP that should be adequate, but I think it is hard for them to control political campaign outside where there was a lot of close contact. So after that we saw a surge in COVID. And as a result, I think the government then used that as a case for the second time, persuade the king to suspend parliament with a declaration of emergency. So in January this year, on the 12th, the prime minister persuaded the king to declare a state of national emergency due to COVID. And with that declaration, the first thing that was suspended was parliament and therefore elections. So there's no parliament sitting. And essentially under emergency law, the prime minister in many ways is like a dictator. He could pass law, new law, amend old law just by executive decision. And the suspicion and it's based on the fact that just a few days before this declaration of emergency, members of his coalition were leaving him. They were removing their support from him. From a very slim 2-3 majority, two of them say they are not supporting him anymore. So his government was on the verge of collapse when the emergency was declared. So it is our firm belief that emergency was used for political purpose in this case to stay in power. And what is really of concern then is that since then till now, no parliamentary scrutiny in Malaysia, and just yesterday the government just announced a new law, emergency ordinance, where they are able to increase government budget without going through parliament. So now they are reaching out to the treasury to get more money, again in the name of COVID, to fight COVID. So we see that COVID has actually empowered authoritarianism in this country at a time when we really need scrutiny to fight the virus. Another concern is that the historic Undi 18, the lowering of voting age from 21 to 18, because it was linked to automatic voter registration. The previous election commission said they need between 1.5 to 2 years to implement it by this July. But 2 days ago, the new election commission chairman announced that due to COVID, they are going to postpone it by another 14 months to next year, September. Now, this is really suppressing voters' right in Malaysia, voters of young people, disenfranchising a million over, plus another 4 million unregistered voter. Altogether, almost 6 million voter has been disenfranchised. They say they need more time because of COVID, but you know, automatic voter registration is a data processing job. It's not a house-to-house thing. You got the data, you got to place them into the constituency, and yes, there's a lot of voters, 5 million, but these are data processing work that COVID should not be affected. So we see that in Malaysia, COVID has been a convenient ally or excuse used by people in power to stay in power. So I just want to give this report as of now for Malaysia. I'll be happy to take questions later on. Back to you, Harold.
Thank you, Thomas, for your very fruitful explanations. Thomas share out their experience in particular about the historical context about the democratizations in Malaysia, and also the political context that the impact from the COVID-19. Also, Thomas mentioned how the way the formulate the public policy in the middle of the COVID-19 is very not democratic, because under the emergency law, so the government, I mean like the monarchy government, they can produce the decisions and also the public policy, and also Thomas mentioned about the budget also in the name of the COVID-19. So we will move to the third speakers. We have a friend from the Philippines, Eric Alvia. Pak Eric, please share your experience and also your analysis about the impact of the COVID-19, in particular in the Philippines. The time is yours, Pak Eric.
Okay, thank you very much, Heroic. Yeah, let me share first my slide. Good. Okay. I'll start first with this outline. No? Basically, I'll be discussing the conditions of democracy in the Philippines during the pandemic. Number two, I will tackle the challenges related to democracy and elections in the Philippines. And third, I would evaluate these conditions and offer some recommendations to strengthen civil society and democracy. Just a day ago or 2 days ago, we've seen that the Philippines again is the worst country in Southeast Asia being hit by the pandemic. No? If you see the orange chart, no, you've seen a huge spike, no, in the number of cases. No? These are active cases in the Philippines. No? And if you compare it even to Indonesia, where it used to lord over, now we have the more active cases, despite having a population which is probably just half of the size of Indonesia. You can also see that the scale of the cases in other Southeast Asian countries are on a decline. I'm showing this because it only shows that similar to what Thomas has mentioned, the pandemic has been a bane to the Philippines, especially with regards to democratic space. No? The pandemic has been a convenient excuse to curtail certain civil liberties or certain and even institute certain autocratic practices. No? Here's a condition right now in the Philippines. No? For the past more than a year now, no? There have been a further narrowing of democratic space, a decline in the democratic practices, and weakening of democratic institutions and erosion of civil liberties during the pandemic. And this can be shown by previous studies of the Economic Intelligence Unit, Freedom House, and VDEM Institute. The pandemic further enabled the policy and rhetoric of our current administration on its anti-drug campaign and have created weak or fragile institutions that are prone to abuse of power. Third, there's an increasing role also of the police and military in governance, which undermines efforts at institutionalizing democratic control and oversight over this institutions, the security forces. We've seen that the response towards the pandemic was more of a military response or a security response rather than a public health response. Fourth, the regime's systematic and aggressive attacks against the political institutions, our judiciary and media has weakened also the capacity of these institutions to hold the administration, the regime accountable. Fifth, there also has been a disinformation campaign that has been launched by troll armies, which are state-sponsored, to further erode and corrode the capacity of the public to engage in critical discourse and informed political decision-making. Now, let me just share how we've backslid for the past few months or even years now. And just to emphasize, this backsliding in democratic space and democratic values didn't start in this administration alone. As early as the previous administration of Aquino, this has been already an observed trend. We've seen even journalists being targeted for its exposition of the truth or even of the news. So it's consistent with the past few years, and this has worsened in the past few years that since 1997, we've slid from 51st to the 55th place, and this is the EIU Democracy Index. And it also showed that we are no longer considered one of the top democracies in the region, but we're a flawed democracy. In fact, the top democracy that I've checked right now is East Timor, Timor-Leste. They're the top country right now in Southeast Asia with regards to democracy. And EIU says that we are a flawed democracy and that while we have free and fair elections, now there are problems such as the infringement of media freedoms, basic civil liberties are still respected but are threatened. However, there are significant weaknesses also to democracy, which includes weak governance, underdeveloped political culture wherein we still have political clans and lording over, or political groups lording over rather than institutions, and low levels of political participation. There are two major reasons for a decline in democracy, and they've noticed that this is due to the withdrawal of civil liberties, attacks on freedom of expression, and the failures of accountability that has resulted due to the pandemic. Again, I've mentioned certain authoritarian practices that have cropped up during the past year. In 2020 alone, there have been various cases of abuse from authorities carrying out pandemic-related curbs that have been recorded, and with the Duterte administration facing criticism that it was carried out in a militaristic approach to the health crisis. I mentioned that earlier. And in May of last year, we saw that one of our largest media networks was forced to close by Congress, and its franchise was not renewed. And this has been seen as an attempt to stifle freedom of expression in an attack on the press. A few months later, Duterte fast-tracked the approval of a controversial anti-terror law, leading lawmakers to swiftly pass the measure that he eventually signed. This was unprecedented because this was passed in a couple of months. And despite that, there are 37 petitions in the Supreme Court that is questioning this law because of its vague provisions and also of dissent and an affront against certain critics. Now, this also, in the past months, although it has been going on already, Duterte's drug war would see also a continued despite the raging pandemic. Right now, people say that it's still continuing, but in the guise of anti-drug, the anti-drug campaign, people have been killed. People have been summarily accused of drugs, engaging in illegal drugs, and they would not be called to court, but they would just be killed right there and there, at times in their residences. And there's this incidents also, besides being accused of being engaged in being targeted for the drug war. If you're free of that, then there's this incidence of red tagging or linking individuals and institutions having close ties with armed communist movement, which also led to some people being threatened, intimidated, or even worse, killed. So these are some of the authoritarian practices that we've seen. What are the challenges and important events related to democracy and elections? There are three interrelated long-term challenges that we see right now. One is that we see that with a pandemic condition, it has set up dangerous precedent by using the pandemic to create a state of exception in which Duterte has amassed extraordinary powers, frozen normal politics, and circumvented normal constitutional procedures, and even, in fact, demonized political opposition in the name of public safety, in the name of a pandemic response. Number two, the COVID crisis, the pandemic crisis, presents government with an opportunity to shape the contours or even the narrative for the upcoming presidential elections and perhaps lock in illiberal populism for the long term. In the next 14 or 13 months, the Philippines will be having a national elections wherein a new president will be elected. This is a national elections which would define also how we will recover from what we're going through right now. The setbacks that we've gone through right now. It's important because the pandemic is becoming an election issue. Access to even the vaccines are being seen right now as a way or a measure to gain support. Access even to the social amelioration program or the funds, support funds to help those who have been hit by the pandemic are also being misused by local politicians to gain undue support. There are also talks that since he has exceeded his term limit, the term limit for a president in the Philippines is 6 years, he will still run for public office, but for the vice president position, which again locks him into long-term position of office. So the economic crisis also impoverished a lot of Filipinos. I'll show you later how we've become the sick man of Asia again, because it has destabilized even the economy and also our personal finances. So this impoverished Filipinos would likely create further cycles of dependency, radicalization, and patronage and corruption at the expense of democracy. So I think right now, if you talk about freedom of expression, civil liberties, or even deepening democracy in the Philippines, the gut issues will still prevail over these concerns. And the pandemic response will be an election driver and an issue when deciding for an elections this May 2022. Speaking of elections, in the past months, there have been attempts to postpone the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao in the 2022 elections, no? Because they say that an elections is not possible to be conducted under this uh, prevailing health crisis. No? But the Palawan plebiscite, no, just last March 13 showed that we can still conduct an elections in a pandemic environment uh, by adopting proper preparations, no? uh, adopting of the minimum health standards, and adopting of special voting arrangements. In this case, even those people with fever or with a temperature higher than 37.5 were allowed to vote in isolated polling precincts. There are other special voting arrangements that could be adopted. Also, like for instance, advanced voting, because around almost 10% of our Filipinos are overseas workers, no? And there's a sizable voting cohort of Filipinos based abroad. So these laws that are being used by overseas voters could be adopted to local voters also, wherein they can uh, do or participate in advanced voting. Probably start providing access to elections 2 weeks to a month before, similar to what South Korea has done. Now, we are concerned that this rise in new cases, again, this surge in new cases, is hampering voter registration. Right now, the target is to register 7 million additional new voters, but the thing is, only 2 million have registered so far with 6 months left. So we're seeing that there might be some people who would be disenfranchised or who would not be able to vote. As I mentioned earlier, the pandemic, I'll be borrowing a slide from one of our partners, the Ateneo University. And this goes to show that to what extent the pandemic has hit us. No? This has the biggest contraction in our economy since 1947, since after the World War II, no, at minus 9.5. We have the highest self-rated hunger recorded at since 2012, no, at 30.7% of Filipinos who are going hungry. We have a record inflation of 5.2, which is in the highest in 22 years and also the highest in Southeast Asia. Our GDP to public debt ratio is 54.5%. And this is the highest since 2006. Self-rated poverty is 54%. That means 1 out of 2 Filipinos consider themselves poor. We also have the lowest overall confidence at 54.5%, minus 54.5%. This shows that, again, 1 out of 2 Filipinos don't see a bright future in the coming months. And we have the highest unemployment rate at 17.68. All of these things should be considered in looking at democracy, because this statistics, or at least this condition that the Filipinos are going through right now, becomes also an excuse or as an avenue for people to curtail freedoms, or democratic or free speech, or even civil liberties. So again, if in fact we're seeing here is that if the pandemic gets worse again for the Philippines, democracy will further suffer. And we fear that in the next few months, as this happens, it will affect how elections would be conducted in a free and fair manner, and how independent the voters will be when they make a decision this May 2022. Thank you very much. Oh no, I still have recommendations to share. No? So all is not bleak, no, for the Philippines. No, we see also that while there's an intensification in authoritarian practices, there also remains other forms of fragmented democratic expressions in the form of uh, exemplary or good local government leaders. We see that citizens' participation is very active, especially in seeking accountability through digital innovations, no? By having a uh, budget monitoring, or how the pandemic money is being spent by the local governments. And again, electoral resilience, no? Wherein people still feel that elections is very important to determine succession and also their leaders, local and national. These practices may probably not be as as big, no, or as uh, may have a limited scope, no. But again, no, its impact is far-reaching, and its consequences more sustainable, because you can see that this counters authoritarian practices. Thank you very much, Edward.
Thank you, Eric, for your great presentations. Eric mentioned a lot of things about the impact of the COVID-19 to the democracy process in the Philippines. He also mentions that the pandemic COVID-19, in the name of the crisis, the strengthening democratic space is one of the challenges in the Philippines, and also the significant role of the military, and also the role of the police and the military to take care about the pandemic COVID-19 crisis. And also Eric mentions under the COVID-19 pandemic, the quality of democracy index provided by the economic intelligence units more declining in the Philippines. And the last, Eric mentions the COVID-19 situation under the crisis situations open the political opportunity for the illiberal populism to come up and to take control the governance process in the Philippines. So I will move to the fourth questions, the last but not least. Ibu Titi Anggraini from Association for Elections and Democracy, Perludem from Indonesia. Mbak Titi, can you explain to us the impact of the COVID-19 to the process of democratic in Indonesia, and also maybe you can share the experience about how to holding the local elections last year in Indonesia, and also about the situation like we heard before from the Malaysia and also from the Philippines. So there is some screening space from the civil society to come up and to speak up during the pandemic crisis. So the time is yours, Mbak Titi.
Okay, thank you, Heroic, for the opportunity you gave to me to present my point of view on Indonesian democracy in the time of pandemic. How about my voice? You can hear my voice clearly?
Yes, Mbak Titi, we can hear your voice clearly.
Oke, Pak Thomas, Mbak Chandanie, Mr. Eric, and all the participants, greetings to you all. Actually, my presentation not only will focus on last local election, but also I will view the broader context of democracy, Indonesian democracy situation in Indonesia recently. Yeah. First, I will start by giving you a bigger picture of Indonesian democracy, what I call it as a big and complex democracy. As you know that Indonesian democracy is the third largest democratic country in the world, with its more than 270 million populations. Indonesia also the biggest Muslim democratic country in the world, with its more than 80% population are Muslim. And we are also the biggest one-day election in the world with more than 190 million voters that register in the fixed voter list of the 2019 simultaneous election. So in 2019, we have a legislative and presidential election at the same time, same polling station, and same date. So that's why we call it simultaneous election, to elect president and legislative candidates at the same time. With more than 200,000 candidates competed in elections. So it's the biggest one-day election, but also the most complex election system in the world. So you can imagine to combine the size and also the complexity of Indonesian election. To run the Indonesian election is not easy at all. And also in 2020, Indonesia also organized the second biggest election in the world amidst pandemic COVID-19. Although it's a regional elections to elect a regional head and vice head of provincial level, regency and city level, but the size of the voters, we were number 2 in the world after United States, with more than 100 million voters registered in the fixed voter list. So this is the bigger picture of Indonesian electoral democracy. But the recent performance of Indonesian democracy, I quoted from several global index. First, based on the Global State of Democracy Index that released by International IDEA in 2019, the Indonesian democracy status categorized as mid-range performance. And then refer to the Economist Intelligence Unit Democracy Index that released in early 2021. Indonesian democracy categorized as flawed democracy, with our rank in 64 and the score is 6.30. The score was the lowest score since 2005. So although we are stagnant or stable in rank 64, but the score is the lowest score since 2005. The decline contributed more by the low score on political culture variable. So the political culture variable decline compared to last year scores. And refer to Freedom in the World Index released by Freedom House in last 2020, Indonesia democracy categorized as partly free. So it's not fully free, but partly free with our score 61 of 100. And based on the FIDEM Institute index, Indonesian democracy categorized as electoral democracy. We are not yet categorized as free democracy country, but as an electoral democracy. So we are implement free and fair election, but not yet fully democratic country. But I think it is at least better compared to India, whose decline from electoral democracy into autocracy democracy. So that's also an alarm for us in Indonesia. India as the second biggest democratic country in the world, now no longer electoral democracy, but shifting to autocracy democracy. And refer to electoral integrity project by refer to their the perception of electoral integrity index. Indonesia categorized as moderate country, rank 54 of 166 countries. And from the Corruption Perception Index, that released by Transparency International, the score of Indonesia is 37. We are ranked 102 of 180 countries. What is it? Below Malaysia, below Timor Leste, and also below Singapore. these scores decline compared to 2019, which our score was 40 and our rank is 85. And the last one, if we refer to World Economic Forum, the Global Gender Gap Index that released recently in March 2021, Indonesian rank is in 101 of 156 countries with our score 0.68. So based on this data, you can have your own conclusion to figure out the situation and the performance of Indonesian democracy. That from Freedom House Index and also the Economist Intelligence Unit Index, the Democracy Index from the Economist, the performance of Indonesian democracy is decline compared to several years ago. And what is the persistent challenges of Indonesian democracy? I noted that Indonesian democracy for more than 20 years after the Reformation in 1998, because we start the democracy environment when we have Reformation or Reformasi in 1988, we are still struggling with procedural problems regarding electoral governance, democratization of political parties, etc. But Indonesia has not yet produced a substantive democratic product. For instance, absence of corruption, access to justice, fulfillment of fundamental rights, impartial administration, and so on and so on. So we are still struggling with the procedural democracy, not yet reaching a substantive democracy. And also, one of my notes from the 20 years of democracy in Indonesia, oligarchy also grows along with democracy. Not only is democracy developing, but oligarchy has also strengthened along with political actors. There are three, at least, persistent challenges that faced by Indonesian democracy. First, corruptions. Indonesia still not yet free from corruption, or we don't have absence of corruption. We are still struggling with high number of corruption cases. You also see that our CPI index also declined compared to last year. We also facing massive problems regarding political corruptions, candidacy buying, vote buying, untransparent and accountable campaign finance, and so on and so on. And the second challenges is gender equality. Women's representation is still far from the target of at least 30% in parliament. Although Indonesia election laws, we have affirmative action schema, but the numbers of female members in parliament still below the target. There are 121 female MPs now in national parliament among 575 MPs. It's equal to 21%, so still below the target of 30%. And the last challenge is political party dysfunction. There is no democratization within the political party. Political parties are controlled by the owners of the capital, who also leads the party structure and monopolize the political recruitment, whereas the political recruitment oriented towards the elite and dynastic politics. We are facing the worst situation regarding the dynastic politics compared to last election. More and more dynastic politics elected in our elections. And also democracy, Indonesian democracy amidst pandemic. The space for public participation in law or policy making processes is getting narrower, shrinking space of public participation. With the reason of the pandemic, the lawmaking takes place very quick and instant, without any significant public involvement. For example, when the House of Representatives revised the law of Corruption Eradication Commission, there's almost no public involvement in the process. Although there were massive demonstration and protests in the street, but they were going on with their own agenda. So this law, the revision of Corruption Eradication Commission law or KPK law, believed by us, civil society, has weakened the KPK as Eradication Commission. And also what we learned from the ratification or enactment of the mining law, the process is so quick and almost no chance for public to get involved in the process. With the reason that now is the pandemic situation, we cannot, have a, flexible access for public to join the process. And that's always put it as an argument from the policymakers or lawmakers. And the last one is the revision of the Constitutional Court law that taken place only within 7 days. And although there's a protest from civil society, but government and parliament still goes on with their own agenda. So the shrinking space of public participation in lawmaking process is real, and still faced by us in Indonesia. And also regarding the last 2020 regional election, or what we call it in Indonesia Pilkada, pemilihan kepala daerah. So when I said Pilkada, it means regional head and vice head elections. In 2020, Indonesia conducted regional heads and vice heads election in 270 regions. We have a high voter turnout. So there were 76% voter turnout. It's relatively high. But it's also accompanied by the increasing of electability of political dynasties. You know that the son of President Jokowi was elected as a mayor of Solo or Surakarta city, and his son-in-law Bobby was elected in Medan city. So now President Jokowi has his son and also his son-in-law as a head of region in as a product of 2020 Pilkada. Why we have a high voter turnout? I already mentioned in several webinar and discussion, including in Halalan webinar that organized by Ateneo School of Government in cooperation with NAMFREL. In Indonesia, the government try hard to mobilize the voters to the polling station. You know that in Indonesia, the law stated that voting days is a holiday. So there's no reason for the voters not to go to the polling station. And also government released a massive advertisement before the voting day. Civil society like Perludem raised concern during the Pilkada because the Pilkada taken place when the cases of COVID-19 very high in Indonesia. We propose to the government and lawmakers to move the Pilkada to 2021 because of the consideration of the high cases of COVID-19. But KPU, government, and also parliament still insist with their decision to continue the election process, the local election process in 2020. And as the impact of Pilkada amidst the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, the candidates nomination processes by political parties conducted not transparent, very exclusive, and sorry, this is a typo, and elite-based. Almost there's no room for public to oversee the process. The pandemic has limited access and space for the public to oversee the nomination process. As the result, one of the result of this untransparent process, regions with only one pair of candidates contested in the election, or what we call it unopposed candidate, or in Indonesia what we call it single candidate or calon tunggal, have increased dramatically from only happened in 16 regions in 2018, increased to 25 regions in 2020. So from 270 regions conducted Pilkada in 2020, there were 25 regions with only one pair of candidates. So it's an uncontested or unopposed candidate. All those unopposed candidates won the elections. It is an anomaly for Indonesian politics with its multi-party system and vast number of voters. Because in global reference, usually unopposed candidates happen in small electorates with small numbers of political parties. But in Indonesia, with 16 political parties, and then it's resulted only one pair of candidates. It's an anomaly. And also, I believe that it's part of the impact of the running the election amidst the pandemic COVID-19. And the last concern from the last Pilkada is election amidst the COVID-19 pandemic were very risky and should not be carried out carelessly, because the stake are the safety of human life. Based on our data, COVID-19 infected at least 70 candidates, 40 commissioners, and more than 100 KPU staff at all levels. At least 7 candidates died while the election stage took place, and 4 elected candidates died before their inauguration. So this is a reference maybe for our colleagues in Philippines, to make sure that all the election process handle carefully and meet all the health protocols. And I would like to, Heroic, give me more than 3 minutes more. I would like to refer to International Idea GSOD when they, make an indicator on democratic backsliding in their publication in 2017 about exploring democracy resilience. There were 4 indicators of democratic backsliding, consist of 2 traditional democratic backsliding and 2 modern democratic backsliding. Traditional democratic backsliding consists of coup d'état, or like what we happen in Myanmar, and the second one is election day voter fraud. But we also face modern democratic backsliding, consists of strategic manipulation of elections by manipulating campaign finance, political finance, and so on and so on. And the last one is executive aggrandizement. How the executive power try to seizing or extend their power, and also change the presidential term limit. So by referring to this indicator, Indonesian also tends to have some of this indicator in current development. I show you there are 2 influential political actors and political figure. He is one of the elites from the Gerindra party, and he is a famous pollster, executive director of Indobarometer. It's a famous pollster in Indonesia. Both of them openly, publicly promoting to change the presidential term limit in Indonesia from 2 terms with maximum 10 years in power to 3 terms, maximum 15 years in power. Because in Indonesia, 1 term equal to 5 years. We are different with Philippines. You are only one term in power with 6 years, but in Indonesia, president can be re-elected for one term, maximum one term. He is Mr. Kodari proposing to have Jokowi and Prabowo as candidates for the 2024 elections, to avoid the polarization in Indonesian society, Indonesian voters. So instead of providing flexible and more accessible access to compete in election, he preferred to have like Jokowi and Prabowo for 2024. And this is Arief Puyono. He publicly and openly proposed that we change the term limit from 2 to 3 terms. So this is refer to idea indicators, part of the indicator of democratic backsliding, when the elites try to seize the power of the executive or to change the presidential term limit. And other crucial issues, this is the last slide, heroic. Based on the current laws, legislative election, presidential election, and regional head election or pilkada will be held in the same year, 2024. Even in different months, KPU proposing to conduct the legislative and presidential election simultaneously in February or March 2024, and pilkada in November 2024. But we are, as civil society, worried that the election will not go democratic due to the technical complexity and the confuse of voters. Voters will focus only on the presidential election, thereby reducing their attention to the legislative election. And I believe that it will decrease the quality of Indonesian democracy. And my recommendation, how we keep maintaining our democracy in Indonesia, first, keep maintain a vibrant and dynamic civil society. How civil society in Indonesia to consolidate and connect. So we must push the consolidation and connectivity of civil society movements, strengthen the synergy and solidity among CSO, student movements, academia, media, and etc. Across issue and actors. We cannot working alone as a democratic institution, but we have to work together with other institutions across issues and actors. And the last one is to ensure that the military is not involved in political activities. I will stop now. Thank you, Heroic. That's all from me.
Thank you, Mbak Titi, for your very fruitful presentations. So Mbak Titi also mentioned that the pandemic COVID-19 also impact to the shrinking public space in Indonesia. Mbak Titi also give some example for the formulations of the several bills in Indonesia. There is no participations, there is no public involvement, and such as the Commission Eradictions Law and also the Minings Law and also the Constitutional Courts Law. There is no public engagement and also public involvement during the process. And also, Mbak Titi mentioned that the experience of the conducted local head election simultaneously in the previous years is not easy because we have a lot of voters in there. And also, Mbak Titi mentioned a lot of democracy indices that mentioned Indonesia is declining the democratic quality from the several years. All right, we will move to the questions and answer sessions. Please, attendees or participant, if you have any question, you can chat on the Q&A, your name, and we will open your mic to give questions directly, or you can type the question on the Q&A box. Is there any questions for the participant, please? Okay. Okay. Maybe Amel, you have a questions? Nurul Amalia.
Hello.
Okay. Hello, Amel, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mas Oik, for the opportunity to ask to me to ask directly. Good day for all the panelists and the attendees. I'm Amalia from Perludem. Thank you for the interesting explanation from all the source persons. I feel very informed. I have some curious questions for all the panelists. From your presentation, I see that a lot of voter and civil suppression happened more severely in elections during pandemic. In fact, the main actor were the government and also the ruling party. So regarding that matter, how do the voters and civil society in your country respond, and is civil society pressured to such an extent that it can no longer do much? And also about social media, from your observation, that social media provide a certain degree of freedom that can be used to consolidate the power of civil society against those forms of the authoritarianism, because authoritarian government campaign has been spreading on social media. So we are here in Indonesia actually knew when some number of people had that during a demonstration in Myanmar. And what do you think about this? That's all my questions. Thank you very much. I am very glad to have all of the panelists in this discussion.
Thank you, Amel, for your questions. So for the other participant, if you have a questions in bahasa, please. Ibu Bapak, jika ingin bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia, silakan. Nanti akan coba kami translatekan. Silakan, Bapak Ibu, jika ada pertanyaan. Okay. Okay, if there is no questions from the participant, I will give a time for each speaker to respond the questions from the Amel about the civil suppressions and also the voter suppressions during the holding the elections. And also the second question is about the role of the social media during the democratization process, and also about the shrinking of public space and also in the social media arena. So from the first one, I give the floor to Ibu Titi. Please, Mbak Titi.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Amel. As you know that recently Constitutional Court already make a ruling on several election dispute decision. So it's decided by Constitutional Court that there are 16 regions that will have revote and recounting process. So if we take a look deeply in the decision, the revote and recounting decision cause relative mostly because of the limited access of voters because of the pandemic. So for example, in Morowali Utara and also in Halmahera Utara, because the company did not give permission to the voters to cast their votes out of the company area, so Constitutional Court make a decision, make a ruling to have a revote in those two regions. So it's proven that COVID-19 pandemic, holding election amidst COVID-19 pandemic also impacted the right to vote by the voters. And also there's decision to have a revote in some regions because of the massive, not massive yet, but because of the violations and vote buying cases in several regions. Why we have violations and vote buying cases? Because there's narrow space for the public to monitor and to oversee the election processes. So because of the pandemic, there's so many limitations faced by the voters to get involved in the process. That's why the decision made by the Constitutional Court to have revote and recounting is highest compared to local elections since 2015. In 2015, only 6 regions have a revote process, and in 2017, only, if I'm not mistaken, 7. And then in 2018, 5 regions, and now 16 regions decided to have revote and recounting. And also, how about the voter suppression? I don't see massive voter suppression, yeah, but limited access to cast their votes because of the policy of the mining company and then agricultural company for their employees to go out from the company to cast their votes increase compared to last election. That's my first response. But the biggest problem we face in Indonesia is the narrow space for the civil society to participate in the lawmaking process. As I mentioned earlier, the law made by Parliament very quick and with no significant civil society involvement. If we continue this culture, it will endanger our democracy ecosystem. So we have to give more attention to our parliament in lawmaking process, especially when they release a very strategic laws like the revision of Corruption Eradication Commission law, constitutional law, and so on and so on. So how about the role of social media? That's very interesting because in Indonesia, the social media become like alternate media to express their democratic view. How the civil society actors use YouTube and also other social media platforms as a platform to express their opinion and ideas. I feel I feel good, yeah, that we still can use the social media platforms as our expression medium to publish our idea, opinions, and so on and so on. But also we face what we call it doxing, when we have critics to government, critics to political party, or critics to elite actors, and then it will be followed by a doxing, massive doxing conducted by buzzer. So we don't have like a good regulation to regulate buzzers. So we can protect the freedom of expression by the civil society. I think that's also one of our biggest homework in Indonesia, how we protect the civil society actors when they express their opinion and ideas, so not suppressed by the buzzer and also by the group anonymous groups in our social media platform. That's my response, Heroic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Titi. Before we move to the other speaker to answer the AMEL questions, so there is a question too from the Rahmatullah Rahmat. His question is there the good method to holding elections in the time of the pandemic COVID-19? It's the second question from the Rahmat. And the third question from Mudiati. I believe that becoming less democratic is unavoidable during pandemic COVID-19. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? So there is some other questions from Rahmatullah and also from one from Mudiati. So I will move to the Eric. Please, if you have answer from the three questions from the three person, please.
Okay, yes, thank you. Primarily, first, what we're looking at right now is we want to make sure that the pandemic will not be used as an excuse to withhold elections, no, in this 2022, because for the past months, we've seen attempts by various groups or even people in our Congress to postpone the elections, no, in the guise of making sure that everyone is safe, and also being concerned that running an elections will become a super spreader event. No? So that's one major event that we want to watch. No? That elections can be run even if there is a pandemic, provided that the minimum health standards are observed and provided that advanced preparations are being done. Uh, we also know that the timing of the elections, no, comes when we are also having a second wave, no, or even in fact the release of certain resources to local governments. We are watching that carefully, that the release of resources to the people is not misused to influence their decisions in May 2022 and will give undue advantage to certain candidates, most especially if they are not from the incumbents or they are not sitting in position right now. We are also seeing that despite the pandemic, the pandemic should be inclusive. It should also make sure that no one is disenfranchised to vote. That's precisely why we are helping our EMB, the COMELEC, in making sure that each and every available, citizen would be able to register and participate in the elections. Now, as to campaign finance, we are also watching if the resources that are going to be made available for campaigning, no, will not be coming from the pandemic funds, or at least resources that are allocated for the vaccines or even for the social amelioration fund. If now the next question, is it unavoidable that you will really be less democratic when you go through the pandemic? I would tend to disagree with that. No, I would still say that the approach towards the pandemic should be based on science, based on public health, and it should be considered a public health issue rather than a security or a political issue. This is one guarantee that it's not a black or white option or a binary option that you will have to suspend democratic principles or civil liberties because you want to ensure public health or at least ensure the safety of your citizens. These two things can coexist. No? But again, it has to be made sure that it does not also infringe on the personal or civil rights of each individual. Thank you, Heroic.
Thank you, Eric, for your answers. Now I'll move to Thomas to answer the three questions from Amel and also from the other. Please, Thomas.
Thank you. I think I would like to combine the two questions, about whether the statement that is unavoidable during a pandemic to become less democratic, and is there a safe way to vote during a pandemic? I think I fully agree with what Eric said, that I think the danger we are facing and experiencing actually is that a lot of government are actually suppressing votes and bypassing democratic norms during this period. And I don't believe it is necessary to be less democratic, because if democracy is not just a form of government that we believe is best for our country, but it is a very is highly valued, then you would want to find ways to continue the democratic process, including elections, in a safe and responsible way. So I see that actually the opportunity for a lot of election management body during this time of pandemic. And I think we need to be reminded that it is likely that this is not going to be a one-off pandemic. We have to be ready that there will be future COVIDs and other pandemic coming along. So this is actually a time for election management bodies to explore ways whereby people can exercise their democratic right safely, conveniently, in different ways. So we locally in Malaysia have been calling on the election commission to extend postal voting to people during by-elections or during the state elections, where it has not been widely extended. So only, for example, police and army are able to do that. But we are saying extend it to anyone who wants to vote using postal ballots. But that call has not been heeded. And also we have a situation, as you know, Malaysia geographically is separated by the South China Sea. So we have Sabah and Sarawak on one side of the sea and Peninsula on one side. So, but we have a lot of Sabahan and Sarawakian working and living in Peninsula. So when it comes election, they actually have to fly back to cast their vote in their constituency. And we are talking about 600,000 such voters or so that could have been easily uh, brought into the election process through postal ballot or through some sort of remote voting, even urging e-voting, you know. So I think this is actually a time for all EMBs all over the world to explore ways to allow people to vote safely and also moving forward, you know, as conveniently, as securely as possible, rather than suppressing and delaying elections and worst of all, suspending parliament during this time. So I don't agree with that statement that it's unavoidable that we should be less democratic during this time.
Thank you, Thomas, for your answer. Now I give time to Chandanie to answer the three questions. Please, the time is yours, Chandanie. Chandanie, you are still muted.
Okay, Heroic?
Yeah, we can hear.
Thank you, Heroic. And also before I responded to the questions, I would like to actually endorse that what Thomas and also that Eric shared. Actually, this is the pandemic is the opportunity. This is the time to way forward and think about that more like areas that are to overcome the challenges, ensuring the democratic and also the free and fair elections. And actually that the most of the countries that are the laws or the constitutions allow to postpone the elections in various ways. And the if it is like the natural disaster, insecure situation, they may allow. But however, it doesn't mean the countries that they can postpone the elections if there's no reason, there's a way to organize in even the undermine whatever the risk, undermine the whatever the pandemic, everything. And we have experience in the elections in the past year, and even this year, most of the Asian countries, they overcome this challenge. And in Sri Lanka, in South Korea, Singapore, Myanmar, the big elections. And some countries like South Korea, of course, they have resources, they have techniques, and Singapore also the same. But in Sri Lanka or the Myanmar, they have a low tech, low resources, but they overcome. How they overcome that challenges? Collaborating, consultation with the different groups, and also the identified that alternative methods. And this is that in Myanmar also, we have seen that voter turnout is compared to 2015 elections, it is increased. And also that the Singapore also, the voter turnout was increased. And in the South Korea also, the voter turnout was increased. It doesn't mean that pandemic affected that. That means that they have taken the alternative methods like the advanced voting or the postal voting, and the increase in the time for the voting, and also the increase in the polling stations, and different way they try to increase to that the ensuring the free and fair elections. I think this is that any country, if they try and make use of that pandemic to undermine that franchise right or the people rights, I think that we cannot agree as the civil society actors who are promoting the democracy. If there's any specific reasons, of course, we need to identify it. Of course, they all the stakeholders, political parties, civil society, they are telling, okay, please postpone until that we identify the risk mitigation methods, until we identified the risk mitigation, because that pandemic, we don't know when is ending. We thought last year it may be end last year, but it is this year is coming out with the second wave, third wave. Are we postponing? Are we going without parliament, without the legislator? Some country, if that term over, it is hand over to the president. It is like a president is a one person power. Are we giving to that way? And it's like I think it's like undemocratic way if we are promoting. And that is, I think we need to think about. I think that maybe the eye open for this pandemic to like all the stakeholders to think about alternative, the new law reform, legal reform, the regulations, and new techniques, and thing. And also that I would like to respond to the one of the questions I think they asked about the media. I think media is like, when we look at the media, we can divide it to like three areas. One is the government media, second one is the private media, and now new trend is the social media. And the last, the election during the pandemic, we have seen that like a social media is like expanding, and that if even the social media, they don't have the ethics, and even the election day also, there are a lot of the campaign materials, some of the countries. In Sri Lanka, it was highlighted in many reports that media was like a social media, online media, it is beyond that. They are the maybe the press, how do you call it, beyond their expectation or the beyond their ethics. And that is, I think that's why we need it like the balancing, that every candidate, every political party is to have equal participation for the during the election time. Campaign period, it is for the equal level playing, and everyone have an equal place. Even the government media, even the private media. Private media sometimes also the carry that whoever the owner, like the political party or the candidate, they carry the most of the campaign only for that person. The government media, of course, that whoever in the ruling party, then they support for the ruling party. If that country need to think about like regulate the media to ensure the free and fair elections. That's why election management body also have a responsibility working with the government or the whatever media to regulate, come out with the fair regulations, fair ethics, fair the rules, guidelines, whatever. The another question is asked about that civil suppression. I think it is not only the civil suppression, media suppression also it is like possible during that pandemic, because that pandemic is telling you are not allowed to get together. No, you are the physical distance, keep the physical distance. That is also that media. I have experience in, I think Myanmar, that the media persons are not allowed to travel one area to another areas. That means like your freedom of the movement is like restricted because of that. And it is like a, that means like that even the civil society also the same thing. Civil society, they say, oh, you are not allowed to have your own like a, okay, you have to give like all the observers list, and also you have to observe only this area, and you are not allowed to come into the polling station. This way they can undermine, they can suppress the civil society activities. And voters also, that voters did not get enough information, enough like alternative way to vote, exercise their rights. And that is also the suppression of that their freedom, their franchise. Even they are in the list, they are in the, they can vote. There's no guarantee I can go and vote in a secure way. And also the, and if that I think that is undermining their rights, undermining their safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chandanie, for your answer. Mbak Titi, you want add more answer regarding to those two questions?
I think there's three answers already enough, Herwig. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Titi. All right, everyone, because the time, so we are in the end of the discussions. Before we close these discussions, I would like to invite for each speaker to give some closing remarks, 1 minute closing remark regarding to how to we strengthening and protect our democracy in the time of pandemic. So for the first, I will invite Chandanie. Please, Chandanie, to give some closing remark, 1 minute.
First of all, actually, that this discussion is giving a lot of like a recommendation, a lot of suggestions that even with many circumstances that democracy can be undermined, and there's a way that's if there's a bill for always that all the stakeholders, election stakeholders need to discuss, need to get together, need to find that the way to overcome the challenges. That can, the election management body has a major responsibility. They are the major the stakeholder for the managing the elections. They are required to collaborate with all the stakeholders, political party and the media, the civil society, everybody to find risk mitigation methods to have organizing the free, fair and elections, finally the ensuring the democratic governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandanie, for your time and for your participation on these discussions. And we move to Thomas, please, to give some closing remarks. Please, Thomas.
Thank you. I think we are all in agreement that democracy has been facing much pushback over the years. And I think with this 1 whole year of COVID situation, we have seen further pushback just within our region or Southeast Asia. I think the challenge for us also during this time is that because of the pandemic, many people, are facing economic crisis. Country is facing economic crisis, and people are suffering to the point that many are struggling even to live day to day due to the pandemic. So the issues of democracy does not feature very high. So even if we are calling out for support from the public, I think many people are just too preoccupied with just surviving day to day. So the challenge, I think, for us is how do we keep the flames of democracy still burning? It may not be burning bright or strong, but we need to keep it burning so that it's not snuffed out during this time of pandemic by many of this government that leans towards authoritarianism. So I don't have all the answers, but certainly I'm glad that we are talking within our region, and I look forward to participating in more of such discussion with my fellow campaigners for democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for your time and also for your participation in these discussions. Now, I will invite Eric to give a closing remark. Please, Eric, the
Yes.
time is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Let's not be lulled into this false narrative that addressing the pandemic and withholding personal rights or civil rights will not go hand in hand. Democracy and public welfare or public health and safety are compatible with each other. But now's the time also for us to be vigilant, no? To make sure that the situation that we're undergoing right now should not be used as an excuse, no? To further curtail our basic rights. At the same time also, let's not be too complacent that there are groups out there who will abuse, no, whatever power that they have, no, and even in fact encroach on our personal rights. No? Now's the time to be innovative also. Now's the time to make sure that we don't probably have, as Thomas mentioned, not the answers right now, but we can be innovative in seeking even small reforms, small actions that could hopefully contribute towards making sure that we still maintain democracy in our community, in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for your time and also for your participation on this discussion. Last, I would like to invite Ibu Titi to give a closing remark. The time is yours, Mbak Titi.
Ya, terima kasih, Mas Heroik. I think, yeah, democracy in Indonesia faces significant challenges amid the current pandemic situation. With several indicators that shown by so many global indices, as I mentioned in my presentation, it becomes like strong reminders and alarm for us to strengthen our democracy and also our civil society. So Indonesian democracy must not go backwards or return to an authoritarian regime. As part of the reformasi movements, because I was a student at that time, university students, and become part of the reformasi, it's important to remember the message of reformasi toward our situation currently. Therefore, the consolidation of civil society is necessary to overcome all limitation of access together. So we need to have more consolidation and more synergy among the civil societies because the reformation in Indonesia supported and created by the civil society. I think that's my conclusion, Heroik. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Titi. So we are in the end of the discussions. On behalf of Associations for Elections and Democracy, Perludem, we would like to say a big thank you for Thomas, Eric, Chandanie, and also Bu Titi for your time and also for your participation on the discussions. We would like also to say thank you for the all participants on Zoom and also on YouTube. So it is not the last discussions. We will create a routine discussion on Southeast Asia Election Democracy Series. Per month, we have a two-time discussion. So feel free if everyone have input or some topic that need to discuss in the region, please do not hesitate to contact us and we will discuss on this series of discussions. And thank you for your participation and stay healthy, everyone. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mbak Titi. Thank you, Thomas.